Hello and welcome to another educational video about screen printing by Catspit Productions. Today's video is a quick tips video. Quick tips for working with polyester garments. Alright, so we know the big problem with polyester garments is dye migration, also known as bleeding, or quite simply dye sublimation, because that's what it is in fact. Let's see, what are some of the causes of bleeding or dye migration? Well, first of all, we know that printing white ink on certain polyester fabrics or colored fabrics like reds, maroons, navy, black, very dark, intense pigmented polyester garments will have the highest ability to migrate or bleed, which means if you print white ink on them, and you plastisol ink we're talking about here, because this is the most common scenario with plastisol inks. You print the plastisol ink on a maroon polyester shirt, and then you send it through the oven at 330 degrees, and the dye in the shirt will actually sublimate it. It gets gaseous, and it migrates or seeps into the ink layer, therefore coloring the ink layer, so that the white coming out on the other end of the dryer is now going to look pink or blue if you're on a navy. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so there's another cause, not only that raising the temperature of your polyester fabric above 330 or 320 is going to make a dye migration situation a lot more possible to happen, but also you have to be careful of the quality of the shirt. The quality of your shirt can often have a lot to do with whether or not you have dye migration problems. First of all, the dye job on the polyester garment could be poor, and that could cause problems when you print white ink on these colors that we're talking about. Okay. Also, you can find issues with redyes, and this can even be an issue with 100% cotton garments, where say they had a bunch of yellow shirts and they decided that because they get a big order they're going to dye them navy now. So a redye also would make a unstable dye situation for the garment itself. All right, so that's something that you have to look at. The higher quality polyester garments with the higher quality dye jobs should have less problems with dye migration. So then the question is, how do we prevent dye migration when we print on polyester garments that are of those specific colors that are of most concern? The reds, the navies, the maroons, black, all these heavy colors, okay? Even with white ink, print on yellow, it's a possibility, okay? Anytime you're dealing with white ink on a polyester garment, how do we prevent that dye migration? Well, there's a couple of ways that you can try to prevent the dye migration. The first way, the most common way, is to do a hit flash hit, which we have talked about before in some of my previous videos. So make sure to check out my other videos in my upload collection on my channel page, and look for videos such as how to screen print white ink on black t-shirts. And you will see that I often talk about there are two ways you can print white on black. You can either do a putty job and flood it and leave a heavy deposit with one hit, or you can actually do two hits and flash in between. So that helps with dye migration, is actually printing once, flash it, and then print it again with the same color, obviously. And right now we're talking about white ink, so that would help control dye migration, and you would want to do that with a really high quality, high opacity white ink. Another way that you can prevent dye migration or control dye migration is simply to buy polyester ink, which is made to be printed on polyester garments. So for instance, I have in my shop, I have a white ink that is specifically designed to block dye migration on polyester garments. So whenever I print polyester garments, I automatically choose my polyester white, just to be on the safe side. And you certainly also could do a hit flash hit with your polyester white, and that would pretty much, I mean, you know, if that doesn't do it, then you know, there must be some serious dye problems with the garment, you know what I'm saying? So that's another way of controlling it. You can also control the dye migration with the temperature of your cure. If you can lower the cure temperature, the less likely dye migration is to occur. So if you try to cure around 320 to still get that plastisol cure, and we're talking Fahrenheit, then you may, you know, lessen your chances for dye migration. However, there are also some additives available that do reduce the cure temperature of plastisol inks, and those may be worth looking into if you're very concerned about dye migration on a certain job. Another way I've heard about controlling dye migration is actually to run the polyester garments through your oven first at a high temperature, which people, you know, actually a lot of people claim allows the dye to go gaseous and vaporize, and it reduces their dye migration problem. I've never tried that myself, and theoretically speaking, the way it works, I'm not so sure that if the dye gas has nowhere to go, if it goes anywhere. In other words, just because it gets hot, if there's nowhere for it to sublimate to or migrate to, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to vaporize into thin air. However, I have heard a lot of people say that this works, so it could be worth it to try. So that's it for today's quick tips on printing on polyester garments. If you would like to learn a lot more about dye migration and how to prevent it and how to work with it, please visit the Catspit Productions website at catspitproductionsllc.com and go to the Printing Articles archive page, which is under the Printing Articles main page, and look for the article. I believe it's under D, because they're alphabetical, and I think it says dye migration, dealing with dye migration, and or something to this effect. I forget the exact name of the article, but there's an article on there. What I'll do is I'll put it in the link below. I'll put the link for the article in the video description below, and if you want, check it out, because that's a great article and it'll give you a lot more technical information on what we just talked about very quickly today. Alright, so thanks a lot for watching. I really appreciate your time and attention, and if you like what you see, please rate, thumbs up, leave a comment below, say hello, or subscribe. I always appreciate that quite a bit. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.